The sharp, artificial scent of lemon cleaner greeted me first, clinging to the air as I shouldered open the door of my parents' house, a bakery box balanced in my hands. In the kitchen, Mom fussed with a lopsided cake stand from the thrift store. The heavier, greasy warmth of roasting chicken wrapped around everything. Aunt Margot was at the dining table, performing her usual pre-dance with the lilies, nudging a vase an inch left, then right, as if perfect floral alignment could somehow raise our family's standing. I set my carrot cake on the counter and dissolved into the walls. Reliable. Invisible. It was a role that fit like a worn sweater. Celeste made her entrance 10 minutes late, her hair a cascade of perfect waves, her voice a bright bell. Sorry I'm late. I was having coffee with a client from Shorewood Hills. Her hands were empty, no gift, no dessert, no card. She brought only a story. Yet, everyone at the table leaned toward her as if she were offering solid gold. Dinner unfolded on its well-worn track. Dad refilled his wine glass. Mom smoothed imaginary wrinkles from her napkin. Aunt Margot provided a steady soundtrack of appreciative nods. My job was the cake. As the serrated knife sank into the frosting, Dad's eyes found me. A familiar smirk played on his lips. "You'll never be as good as your sister," he said, his tone light, teasing. The table erupted in easy laughter. Celeste's smile widened, absorbing the spotlight. Mom let out a soft, complicit chuckle. It was all so harmless, they seemed to say. Just a family joke. I kept my face a placid lake, even as my chest constricted. My hands moved on autopilot, plating slices of cake, but inside, I was scalded. Those words adhered to me, more persistent than the lemon cleaner stinging my nostrils. No one saw the silence that descended over me, a bell jar of my own making. They were already captivated by Celeste's next tale, something about a penthouse condo with a view of the Capitol. Later, I collected my jacket without a word. The night air was a relief. Only when I was parked in the cracked driveway of my apartment did my phone buzz, its screen a sudden blade of light in the dark. A text from Mom. "Next time, bring some paper towels. We're out." I placed the phone face down, its glow imprinted on my vision. In the quiet of my car, I thought of all the words I had swallowed. Alone in my apartment, the paper towel request wouldn't leave me. It was a tiny thread, but pulling it began to unravel the tapestry of my 20s. Each loosened strand was connected to money, quiet, consistent, leaving my account. The memory surfaced clearly, the first time, during a blizzard. Dad's voice, sheepish but sure. "The electric bill's a monster this month. Can you spot us 120 till Friday?" I was 21, a university office assistant whose paycheck vanished into rent for my studio. I sent the money instantly. Friday came and went without mention. Then February needed gas. March needed groceries. Mom's requests were always layered with a sighing apology and a bedrock of expectation. This is what you do, I told myself. This is what a good daughter is. It crystallized into routine. A $300 transfer on the first for utilities. $40 or $60 every Wednesday for groceries. By 25, it was a habit as ingrained as morning coffee. I made countless trips to Woodman's, hauling bags I'd pay for, while my Instagram feed showed Celeste laughing over a latte on the Memorial Union Terrace. I bought and installed a thermostat from Home Depot when Dad's back went out. My credit card covered the deposit for the emergency plumber. Through it all, I recited my mantra, love is reliability. Being the support beam is an honor, even if no one notices the structure they're standing in. Celeste shone, the undisputed star. I was the background hum, constant, essential, and entirely unheard. The change began one idle evening, thumb scrolling through months of bank transactions. Almost without thinking, I started taking screenshots. Then, deliberately, I saved them. A folder for each year, each month. Evidence of a life measured in silent subsidies. The digital folder grew dense, its weight on my psyche more substantial than the silence I carried. I knew, with a cold certainty, that it would have to be opened. Celeste possessed a talent for occupying space, real or digital. Her life was a series of curated vignettes. She staged open houses on Monroe Street, artfully scattering bowls of lemons across granite counters, then posted clips of herself laughing on strangers' porches. Summer evenings found her posed on the Memorial Union Terrace, a plastic cup raised to the sunset over Lake Mendota, a living postcard. Every like and heart eyes emoji that flooded and seemed to validate our parents' unspoken belief. She was the success story. At family dinners, her narratives were the main event. Mom, with proud, rehearsed ease, would tell anyone within earshot that Celeste was on the fast track to becoming Dane County's top realtor. Dad would puff up, marveling at her connections, her knack for knowing the right people. When the conversation ever skirted near domestic realities, a broken appliance, a tight month, history was deftly rewritten. I remember that Thanksgiving with crystal clarity. The water heater had given out. As Aunt Margot offered sympathy, Mom waved a dismissive hand, smiling. Oh, Celeste handled it. Made all the calls. She really saved the day. I sat there, the memory of the $500 plumber's deposit hitting my checking account as fresh as the receipt buried in my folder. I said nothing. My silence was the mortar holding their revised version of events together. My own world, meanwhile, steadily contracted to fit the shape of their needs. I'd decline happy hour with colleagues because I'd just sold my dad for the cable bill. I canceled and recanceled a dental cleaning for 2 years, promising myself I'd go when things calmed down. Even the mundane act of sitting at my own kitchen table was a reminder. The chair wobbled precariously on a loose screw I never fixed, because fixing something for myself always fell behind something they needed. Then came the sentence that cut deepest. During one of Celeste's elaborate tales of a high-stakes closing, Aunt Margot, ever the stage manager of our family tableau, leaned in with a conspiratorial smile. "She's our reliable one, isn't she?" she said, nodding toward Celeste. Mom echoed the nod. Dad's signature smirk appeared. Celeste accepted the title with a radiant grin. Reliable. The word was a physical blow. It was my word. It was the word for the daughter who paid the power bill, who kept the fridge stocked, who was the silent financial undergirding of this very household. In that moment, I watched as my identity, my quiet, burdensome, taken-for-granted role, was stripped from me and publicly bestowed upon my sister like a crown. The theft was so blatant, so smooth, and my own complicit silence suddenly tasted like ash. That night, the silence in my apartment was oppressive. I opened the digital folder on my laptop, its grid of screenshots glaring back. The weight of it seemed to push the air from the room, issuing a silent, terrifying challenge. Added up. Sleep refused to come. The dinner table laughter, the stolen word, it all looped behind my eyelids. Finally, defeated, I reached for my phone in the dark. The cold blue light of the banking app washed over my face. The apartment was still save for the monotonous groan of the radiator. I began to scroll backward in time. The list unspooled, longer and more relentless than I'd allowed myself to remember. Utilities. Groceries. Gas. Car repair. Dad. Mom. Pharmacy. An endless, grim ledger. Just this once, I'd told myself 100 times. Each entry was a tiny tombstone for my own autonomy, marked with a date, an amount, and a bleak, abbreviated memo. Groceries. Bill. Help. At first, I skimmed, a numb archaeologist. But soon, I was reading, truly reading, each one. They were confessional pages from a diary I didn't remember writing, a chronicle of erosion. I told myself I'd only go back a year. Then 2. My finger kept scrolling, dragging years of my life across the tiny screen. When I reached the beginning, the first. Hesitant, spot me for the electric bill, a raw, monstrous number had taken form in my mind. I lunged for the notepad on my couch, a frantic need to make it tangible. Pen in hand, I began to add, column after column, pressing down until the paper nearly tore. The arithmetic was simple. The result was not. I stared at the final figure, $28,917. It wasn't just a number. It was the ghost of a savings account that never was. It was the weekend getaway I always talked about. It was the dental crown I needed. It was 2 years of Friday nights spent alone on my couch while my sister posted photos from lakeside bars. I sat there, the pen shaking in my clenched fist, finally understanding the exorbitant price tag of my silence. The morning after the calculation, action was the only antidote to the panic. I went to the university library, the hushed sanctuary of other people's research, and fed the printer my own damning data. Page after page word out, a whispered history of quiet subsidies. At the dollar store on Johnson Street, I bought the cheapest, sturdiest thing I could find, a thick green folder with metal clasps. That evening, I hole-punched each statement with deliberate, methodical precision, stacking the chronologically ordered sheets into the binder. On the cover, in plain black marker, I wrote a single, unadorned word, household. Closing the clasps sealed more than paper. The heft in my hands was disproportionate, laden with the gravity of years of unspoken expectations. This was no longer a collection of evidence, it was the physical testament of my silence. I knew, with a cold, clear certainty, that a day was coming when silence would be a currency I could no longer afford to spend. The following Sunday, I drove back to the east side. The green folder was my passenger, a secret stashed under the seat. I recited a mantra to myself, you won't need it. Just get through dinner. Maybe, just maybe, it will be different this time. But I had brought it. Its presence was a truth I could no longer deny. Inside, the atmosphere was a familiar museum diorama. The astringent lemon cleaner scent. The table set with wedding china formality. The olfactory blanket of roasting chicken. Aunt Margot orbited the dining table, her eternal orbit around the lilies. Then, the star's entrance, Celeste, 20 minutes tardy, the click of her heels a herald. She carried a glossy boutique bag, from which she produced a candle swaddled in gold foil, presenting it to Mom with the gravity of a state gift. Mom's hands flew to her heart, her face a portrait of delighted reverence. I stood by the counter, my bakery cake already an afterthought, my invisibility complete. Dinner was served. Celeste held court, her monologue a breezy stream of open house anecdotes and name drops of Shorewood Hills clients. Dad chuckled on cue, swirling his wine, the appreciative patron of her one-woman show. I ate, I nodded, I waited. I could feel the moment coalescing in the air, as predictable as the dessert course. It came as the plates were cleared, littered with crumbs of my carrot cake. Dad's eyes settled on me, that old, casual smirk etching his face. He delivered the line as if it were a beloved, harmless family catchphrase. You know, you'll never be as good as your sister. Aunt Margot offered a soft, tinkling laugh, shaking her head in apparent wonder. She really is the one we can always count on. This time, the words didn't just sting, they detonated. A white-hot wire of anger seared through my chest. My hand clenched the fork so tightly the metal bit into my palm. In that instant, I saw it all, the green folder in the car, the pages within, the staggering sum that represented my erased freedom. A dam, meticulously built over a decade, shattered. I placed my fork down with an audible, deliberate click on the china. The sound cut through the room. I lifted my gaze and met my father's eyes directly, my voice unnervingly steady, a flat calm over a tectonic shift. Then tell her to start paying the bills, I said. Because I'm done. No more money. The tableau froze. Mom's gasp was a sharp inhale, her hand plastered over her sternum. Have you lost your mind? Celeste's performance flickered, a blink of genuine surprise before her features settled into a practiced, amused smirk, as if I'd delivered an absurd punchline to improve her act. Dad's smirk vanished, replaced by a stunned, dark frown. Aunt Margot's hands fluttered uselessly over her lily stems. No one spoke. No one moved. The silence was a thick, new entity in the room. For the first time in my life, I did not scramble to soothe it, to mend the rupture with a joke or a concession. I let it expand, let it grow heavy and uncomfortable, as substantive and threatening as the green folder waiting in my car. This silence was mine, and I would let it speak. I knew whatever came next would demand a voice I had yet to fully find. The following Sunday, the family group chat chimed with a new message. The tone was breezy, purposefully light. Dinner at 6. Let's discuss a plan. I understood the subtext perfectly. This was not an invitation, it was a summons to a budget meeting where I was to be assigned my new, formalized dues. Still, I went. This time, the green folder wasn't a secret stashed away. It sat plainly on the passenger seat, its presence a statement. I felt its moral weight with every turn, a co-pilot of cold, hard facts. Walking into the house, the stage had been reset, but for a different kind of performance. The usual familial clutter was absent. The chicken sat pre-carved on a platter, a pragmatic concession to the business at hand. Centered on the table were the tools of a negotiation, a calculator, a tidy stack of envelopes, and a notepad dense with penciled figures. Mom perched on the edge of her seat, posture rigid. Dad wore his serious discussion face, the one reserved for tax notices and parking violations. Celeste was a study in casual detachment, leaning against the kitchen counter, absorbed in her phone. "We've been thinking," Dad began, bypassing any greeting. His voice was all practical reason. "With the way things are going, inflation, interest rates, it just makes sense for everyone to contribute on a regular, formal basis. A family sustainability plan." His index finger tapped the calculator's buttons for emphasis, a dull click-click-click that sounded like a verdict. "Everyone," Mom parroted, her voice thin but insistent. "It's only fair." Her eyes darted toward Celeste, who offered no acknowledgement, her thumbs still dancing across her screen. I took my time. I pulled out the chair, sat, and deliberately slid my bag from my shoulder. Then I placed the green folder on the table between the chicken and the calculator. The sound of its heavy cardstock hitting the wood was a soft, definitive thud. "Before we discuss any new plans," I said, my voice unnervingly calm, "we need to settle the account for the old one." "The last 4 years." Mom's eyes dropped to the folder, confused. "Are those receipts?" "No," I replied, opening the clasps. "These are transfers." I spread the pages with a sweep of my hand. A fan of data unfurled, dates, amounts, my own bleak memos. A record of every payment. Utilities, groceries, the plumber, the thermostat. I might have missed a few. The air in the room turned viscous. Dad's jaw hardened, a muscle ticking near his temple. "This isn't the time or place for this," he said, his tone dropping into a warning. "We're not here to play accountant." Mom reached out, flipping a few pages with a nervous hand. Her frown deepened as she scanned the lines. "Thompson, these were gifts. You offered. We never demanded a thing." Celeste finally deigned to look up from her phone. A slow, incredulous smirk spread across her face. "Wow. You actually kept score." "Yes." The word was simple, clean, and final. I closed the folder, the pages whispering in protest, and drew it back toward me. "I am your daughter. Not your line of credit. Not your silent partner. If you need help, you ask for it clearly. And you respect no as a complete answer." "But the era of the secret subsidy," I said, looking at each of them in turn, "is closed." Dad leaned forward, planting his palms on the table. The calculator was trapped under his left hand. "You are being deeply disrespectful." I held his gaze, the fire in my chest burning steady and clear. "What is disrespectful?" I asked. "Is it disrespectful to show you the cost? Or is it more disrespectful to let you live a fiction funded by my silence?" The silence that crashed down then was absolute, a physical thing. It was sharper than any raised voice, more accusatory than any shout. It lay over the dining table like a shroud, covering the chicken, the calculator, the envelopes, a truth so loud it made all their prepared numbers mute. In that ringing, profound quiet, I felt an old, heavy mantle slip from my shoulders. The role of the silent one was no longer mine to play. The fallout was immediate and digital. The evening after the folder landed on the table, my phone convulsed on the coffee table, a frenzied, blinking brick. The family group chat detonated. Dad's messages were terse bolts of warning. "Don't be dramatic. This isn't how family works." Mom's were sprawling treatises on filial duty, woven with words like sacrifice and respect. Celeste's contribution was a single, perfectly aimed laughing face emoji, a digital sneer that said more than any paragraph. I swiped the notifications away, turning the screen dark and silent. the quiet felt violent. I opened my laptop, the glow a cold substitute for lamplight, and focused on the breath moving in and out of my lungs until the shaking in my hands stilled. Then I began the surgery. One by one, I navigated to the automated transfers. Madison Gas and Electric. Parental Grocery Fund. Dad's Automotive. For each, a dialog box materialized. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer? My finger hovered for only a heartbeat each time before tapping yes. Every confirmation was a suture, closing a wound that had drained me for nearly a decade. The next morning, I performed a new kind of alchemy. I set up a fresh, automated transfer. The payee was my own high-yield savings account. The amount, $340. The date, the 1st of the month. I was replicating the exact rhythm of my old life, but the destination was now a future of my own. It felt simultaneously petty, defiant, and profoundly necessary, the financial equivalent of reclaiming a kidnapped piece of my soul. I shut the laptop, laced up my running shoes, and escaped to the path. The Howard Temin Lakeshore path was shrouded in a gentle fog, the lake a sheet of hammered silver. Geese called, their forms cutting vague shapes in the mist. My body, so long clenched with the anxiety of impending requests, moved with an unfamiliar, aching freedom. I counted my breaths, synced them with my footfalls, starting a new, healthy tally. By noon, the diplomacy began. Aunt Margot's text was a masterclass in faux casual. Coffee? My treat. No ambush, sweetie, I promise. Of course, it was an ambush. She sat across from me in a cafe booth, smiling over a latte, dispensing well-rehearsed homilies about family unity and the permanence of blood. You don't want to burn bridges, dear, she cooed. I let her words dissolve into the background symphony of clinking china and espresso machine hisses. When she paused for breath, I stood, dropped cash on the table for my untouched tea, and said, I have to go. Walking to my car, I whispered my new mantra, boundaries are not brutality. The public campaign launched that evening. Mom's Facebook post was a masterpiece of vague booking. It's so hard when the children you pour your life into forget their roots. A chorus of heart emojis and supportive comments from friends and neighbors piled up beneath it. I didn't engage. Instead, I drove to the Willie Street Co-op and bought wild-caught salmon, organic blackberries, and that expensive French yogurt I'd always deemed an irresponsible luxury. As I put them in my own fridge, a complex knot of relief and grief tightened in my chest. The space felt lighter, but echoed with a new, lonely shape of quiet. Yet, that night, I slid into a sleep so deep and calculation-free it was like sinking into a warm, dark sea. A fundamental gear in the universe had shifted. The first fractures appeared in their curated online reality. Celeste posted a glossy photo of pristine white running shoes perched on a balcony ledge, the blurred lights of downtown Madison behind her. The caption, #selfmade, #hustle. I studied the photo, the memory of a frantic call 2 years prior. My landlord is threatening eviction. It's just a shortfall this one time. Flashing behind my eyes. The one time had lasted for 5 months. The texts resumed. Dad, trying for reason. We're a unit, Thompson. Everyone has a role to play. Mom, switching to negotiation. Let's just put this behind us. How about a set amount? $300 a month. No more confusion. She punctuated it with a smiling face emoji, a small graphic meant to be a peace flag. Then, the physical world intervened. A letter arrived, my address a forwarding sticker over my parents. It was from a collection agency. A past due notice for $312. I held the paper, and the old muscle memory twitched, the immediate, anxious urge to fix, to pay, to make the problem disappear for them. This time, I didn't open my banking app. I opened my scanner. I digitized the notice, composed a new email, attached the file, and addressed it to both my parents. The subject line was the entire message. This is your bill, not mine. I hit send. No justifications. No emotional paragraphs. Just the unadorned, transferable truth. The next family dinner was a study in revised choreography. Celeste's eyes, once so adept at capturing an audience, now expertly dodged mine. For a fleeting second, as she passed the rolls, I saw a flicker, not of apology, but of a wary, calculating recognition. It sparked a foolish hope. Maybe she saw it, maybe she understood the metric ton of quiet labor her golden status had been built upon. The hope died as quickly as it flared. Dad raised his glass for a toast to family, and Mom launched into a soliloquy about weathering storms together. Seizing the spotlight, Celeste leaned back, a studied gesture of casual triumph, tossed her hair, and launched into a tale of a complicated closing she'd single-handedly salvaged. The details were too smooth, the dialogue too cinematic. Her signature smirk smile returned, a shield against any unwelcome reality. The moment of potential connection vanished, replaced by the familiar performance. That night, in the sanctuary of my apartment, I instituted a new law: no financial apps after 9 p.m. The existential algebra of my family's needs could not be solved in the midnight hour. I plugged my phone in across the room, a deliberate exile, and climbed into bed. The quiet that followed was no longer an absence, but a presence. It held me. The calls and texts continued, a digital orbit attempting to pull me back in. But the physics of my world had changed. I felt it. I was no longer spinning in their atmosphere. A new center of gravity, small but dense, was forming within me. I was learning the unfamiliar grammar of stability. The first Sunday of my defection, I made pancakes. The scent of browning butter and maple syrup was a personal sacrament. I ate slowly at my own table, then did something radical. I called a friend from grad school I'd neglected for months. We talked about nothing important. It was an act of quiet rebellion, a reclaiming of time that had always been siphoned away for a grocery run across town. That week, I made the call. The dentist appointment I'd deferred for 2 years. The clinic on Regent Street was nondescript, the chair vinyl and cold. But as the hygienist leaned in, I had a sudden, lucid realization. This is what I deferred. This care, for myself, was the concrete cost of being the reliable one. When I handed over my card for the copay, the transaction felt clean, honest. The only debt being settled was my own. The family narrative machine, however, did not idle. Mom's texts became a bizarre tapestry, interweaving announcements of Celeste's new listings with non sequiturs about blood being thicker than water. Dad sent occasional, grim updates about economic headwinds. Celeste contributed glossy photos from professional triumphs, adorned with champagne bottle emojis. The tone had softened from assault to a persistent, coaxing hum. But the core story remained unaltered. There was no acknowledgement of the ledger, no thanks for the carried weight. They spoke, and in their speaking, attempted to edit the past, using silence, my former silence, as their eraser. One afternoon, I took a tangible step. I walked into the Dane County Courthouse Annex with a form. I officially changed my address on the last few lingering accounts, old magazine subscriptions, a voter registration, that still tied me to their home. No more of their financial debris would land in my mailbox. No more collection notices masquerading as my responsibility would cross my threshold. Exiting into the sunlight, I felt a palpable lightness, as if I had surrendered a heavy, ill-fitting coat I'd worn for years. That evening, I took a note card and wrote in clear, bold letters, "Help. If asked for directly and with respect, it may be considered. Otherwise, the answer is no." I tacked it to the wall above my desk. This was not a manifesto of vengeance. It was a simple, non-negotiable protocol for survival. My gaze drifted to the green folder, now shelved between old novels and a cookbook. It was closed, its testimony complete. I knew then that the unit of measurement for my future had changed. It would not be tallied in quiet transfers, but in choices, breaths, and the resilient space I was learning to call my own. The sun was a slow, molten spill over Lake Mendota. I walked the shore path, my pace matching the gentle lap of water against stone. The lake glittered, a fractured mirror catching fire, where kayaks left fading gold scars on its surface. The air held a clean, even coolness, and my footsteps fell into an unhurried rhythm I had almost forgotten I owned. A vibration against my thigh, faint but insistent. I didn't need to look to know its source. Slowing, I drew the phone from my pocket. The family group chat glowed. Another bulletin from the front lines of Celeste's life. A closed deal, a client's effusive praise, a photo of a gleaming sold sign. The narrative of triumph, uninterrupted. My thumb moved over the screen. That's great. Congratulations. Neutral. Benign. A sentence that carried no freight, promised no funds, bore no hidden hook. I slid the phone back into my pocket, the silence of the path rushing back in. No money. No obligation. The transaction was complete. Home. The evening light slanted across my desk. I opened the small wooden box that had sat there for years, a repository of insignificant mysteries. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, was a tarnished brass key. I'd found it long ago in a junk drawer, belonging to a lock long since discarded, a purpose rendered null. It was perfect. I fixed it inside a simple shadowbox frame. On the plain white mat beneath it, I wrote a single word in precise, black ink, boundary. I hung it on the wall directly above my desk. Not as decoration, but as a landmark. A surveyor's mark for the territory of myself. My gaze shifted to the bookshelf. There, nestled between a worn photo album and a folded wool blanket, was the green folder. I did not take it down. Its weight was no longer in my hands, but in my history. I no longer needed to carry it into conversations like a shield or brandish it like a weapon. Its primary work, the work of bearing witness, of making the invisible visible, was complete. It held the corroborating truth for a fact I no longer doubted. I had given enough. Knowing it existed, solid and factual on that shelf, was its own form of peace. The messages still came. Mom, sharing a blurry picture of the family dog. Dad, mentioning offhandedly that it had been a tight month. The old circuitry, the instant spark of anxious responsibility, remained dark. A quiet, steady understanding had taken its place. Their story was theirs to tell, and theirs to manage. My story had diverged. It was now a narrative of accretion, of building rather than subsidizing. I filled a glass with water, the ice cracking softly. I sat at my desk, in the space beneath the brass key. The silence of my apartment settled around me, a tangible, comfortable thing. This silence was not an absence awaiting their needs to fill it. It was a presence. It was mine. A final, clear sentence formed in the quiet, not as a shout, but as a foundational truth laid down in the bedrock of my new life. I will not let anyone turn my love into a duty.